Excerpts from Chapter 27 and 28 of To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. Things did settle down, after a fashion, as Atticus said they would. Mr. Bob Ewell acquired and lost a job in a matter of days. He was the only man I ever heard of who was fired from the WPA for laziness. Thereafter he resumed his regular weekly appearances at the welfare office for his check, and received it with no grace, amid obscure mutterings that the bastards who thought they ran this town wouldn't permit an honest man to make a living. One Sunday night, Judge Taylor clumped to the back porch and found the screen door swinging open. A shadow on the corner of the house caught his eye, and that was all he saw of his visitor. Mrs. Taylor came home from church to find her husband in his chair with a shotgun across his lap. The third thing happened to Helen Robinson, Tom's widow. Mr. Link Diaz made a job for Helen. He didn't really need her, but he said he felt right bad about the way things turned out. When she was a few yards beyond the Ewell house, she looked around and saw Mr. Ewell walking behind her. All the way to the house, Helen said, she heard a soft voice behind her, crooning foul words. Thoroughly frightened, she telephoned Mr. Link at his store. As Mr. Link came out of his store, he saw Mr. Ewell leaning on the fence. Mr. Ewell said, "Don't you look at me, Link Diaz, like I was dirt. I ain't jumped your—" "First thing you can do, Ewell, is get your stinking carcass off my property. You're leaning on it, and I can't afford fresh paint for it. Second thing you can do is stay away from my cook, or I'll have you up for assault. If you don't think I mean it, just bother that girl again." Mr. Ewell evidently thought he meant it, for Helen reported no further trouble. "I don't like it, Atticus. I don't like it at all," was Aunt Alexandra's assessment of these events. "That man seems to have a permanent running grudge against everybody connected with that case." "I think I understand," said Atticus. "It might be because he knows in his heart that very few people in Maycomb really believed his and Mayella's yarns. He thought he'd be a hero. He'll settle down when the weather changes." By the end of October, our lives had become the familiar routine of school, play, study. Mrs. Grace Merriweather had composed an original pageant, and I was to be a ham. She thought it would be adorable if some of the children were costumed to represent the county's agricultural products. My costume was not much of a problem. Mrs. Crenshaw, the local seamstress, took some chicken wire and bent it into the shape of a cured ham. This she covered with brown cloth and painted it to resemble the original. I could duck under and someone would pull the contraption down over my head. It came almost to my knees. Mrs. Crenshaw thoughtfully left 2 peepholes for me. She did a fine job. Jem said I looked exactly like a ham with legs. Jem said he would take me. Thus began our longest journey together. The weather was unusually warm for the last day of October. We didn't even need jackets. The wind was growing stronger, and Jem said it might be raining before we got home. There was no moon. The street light on the corner cast sharp shadows on the Radley house. I heard Jem laugh softly. "Bet nobody bothers them tonight," he said. The lights in the high school auditorium were blazing in the distance. When we reached the auditorium, most of the county, it seemed, was there. The hall was teeming with slicked-up country people. The high school building had a wide downstairs hallway. People milled around booths that had been installed along each side. "Oh, Jem, I forgot my money," I sighed when I saw them. "Atticus didn't," Jem said. "Here's 30 cents. You can do 6 things. See you later on." I went with Cecil down to the front of the auditorium, through a door on one side, and backstage. We were about to purchase a blob of taffy when Mrs. Merriweather's runners appeared and told us to go backstage. It was time to get ready. The auditorium was filling with people. They said later that Mrs. Merriweather was putting her all into the grand finale, that she had crooned, "Pork!" She waited a few seconds, then called, "Pork!" When nothing materialized, she yelled, "Pork!" I must have heard her in my sleep, or the band playing Dixie woke me, but it was when Mrs. Merriweather triumphantly mounted the stage with the state flag that I chose to make my entrance. Chose is incorrect. I thought I'd better catch up with the rest of them. Mrs. Merriweather seemed to have a hit. Everybody was cheering so. But she caught me backstage and told me I had ruined her pageant. She made me feel awful. But when Jem came to fetch me, he was sympathetic. He consented to wait backstage with me until the audience left. "You want to take it off, Scout?" he asked. "Nah, I'll just keep it on," I said. I could hide my mortification under it. "You all want a ride home?" someone asked. "No, sir, thank you," I heard Jem say. "It's just a little walk." We began crossing the schoolyard, straining to see our feet. "Hush a minute, Scout," he said, pinching me. "Thought I heard something," he said. "Stop a minute." We stopped. "Hear anything?" he asked. "No." We had not gone 5 paces before he made me stop again. "Jem, are you trying to scare me? You know I'm too old." "Be quiet," he said, and I knew he was not joking. Maybe it was the wind rustling the trees. But there wasn't any wind, and there weren't any trees except the big oak. Whoever it was wore thick cotton pants. I felt the sand go cold under my feet, and I knew we were near the big oak. Jem pressed my head. We stopped and listened. Shufflefoot had not stopped with us this time. His trousers swished softly and steadily. Then they stopped. He was running toward us. "Run, Scout! Run! Run!" Jem screamed. I took one giant step and found myself reeling, my arms useless in the dark. I could not keep my balance. "Jem! Jem, help me, Jem!" Something crushed the chicken wire around me. Metal ripped on metal, and I fell to the ground and rolled as far as I could, floundering to escape my wire prison. From somewhere nearby came scuffling, kicking sounds of shoes and flesh scraping dirt and roots. Someone rolled against me, and I felt Jem. More scuffling, and there came a dull crunching sound, and Jem screamed. I ran in the direction of Jem's scream and sank into a flabby male's stomach. Its owner said, "Oof!" and tried to catch my arms. His stomach was soft, but his arms were like steel. He slowly squeezed the breath out of me. I could not move. Suddenly, he was jerked backwards and flung on the ground, almost carrying me with him. The scuffling noises were dying. Someone wheezed, and the night was still again. Still, but for a man breathing heavily and staggering. I thought he went to the tree and leaned against it. He coughed violently, a sobbing, bone-shaking cough. "Jem?" There was no answer but the man's heavy breathing. "Jem?" Jem didn't answer. The man began moving around as if searching for something. I heard him groan and pull something heavy along the ground. It was slowly coming to me that there were now 4 people under the tree. "Atticus?" The man was walking heavily and unsteadily toward the road. I went to where I thought he had been and felt frantically along the ground, reaching out with my toes. Presently I touched someone. "Jem?" My toes touched trousers, a belt buckle, buttons, something I could not identify, a collar, and a face. A prickly stubble on the face told me it was not Jem's. I smelled stale whiskey. I made my way along in what I thought was the direction of the road. I found it and looked down to the street light. A man was passing under it. He was going around the corner. He was carrying Jem. Jem's arm was dangling crazily in front of him. By the time I reached the corner, the man was crossing our front yard. Light from our front door framed Atticus for an instant. He ran down the steps, and together he and the man took Jem inside. I was at the front door when they were going down the hall. Aunt Alexandra was running to meet me. "Call Dr. Reynolds," Atticus's voice came sharply from Jem's room. "Where's Scout?" "Here she is," Aunt Alexandra called, pulling me along with her to the telephone. Atticus came out of Jem's room. The moment Aunt Alexandra broke the connection, Atticus took the receiver from her. He rattled the hook, then said, "Eula May, get me the sheriff, please." "Heck?" "Atticus Finch. Someone's been after my children. Jem's hurt. Between here and the schoolhouse. I can't leave my boy. Got to go now. Thanks, Heck." After 10 forevers, Dr. Reynolds returned. "Is Jem dead?" I asked. "Far from it," he said, squatting down to me. "He's got a bump on the head just like yours, and a broken arm. He's got a bad break. So far as I can tell now, it's in the elbow, like somebody tried to wring his arm off." "Yes, sir." The man who brought Jem in was standing in a corner, leaning against the wall. He was some countryman I did not know. He had probably been at the pageant and was in the vicinity when it happened. He must have heard our screams and come running. "Come in, Heck," said Atticus. "Did you find anything?" "What is it, Heck?" said Atticus. Mr. Tate found his neck and rubbed it. "Bob Ewell's lying on the ground under that tree down yonder with a kitchen knife stuck up under his ribs. He's dead, Mr. Finch."